Hey, Viking fans, it's time to jump in the Wayback Machine and visit the best quarterback seasons in Viking history. Let's do it. Hello, Viking fans. I'm going to do a giveaway. I'm going to describe it to you. I'm going to give away $100 worth of merchandise of your choosing. If I get to 1,000 subscribers, 75 if I get to 750, 50 if I get to 500, 25 if I get to 250. I'm going to choose one person from an episode. So I'm going to choose an episode and I'm going to choose one person as long as they're liked, subscribed, and commented. And you can do multiple comments, multiple entries. You can actually go back to my old videos and do that too. Those will be eligible. Now, I'm going to choose that on game day against the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to choose one. Hopefully, it's $100, and I have 1,000 subscribers. Skol Vikes. Hey, Viking fans, it's time to jump in the Wayback Machine and visit the best quarterback seasons in Viking history. Let's do it. Welcome to Minnesota Sports Talk. I'm your host, Dave. You can follow me on Twitter at SkullWorld and at MN Sports Podcast. Also on Facebook, SkullWorld. Now, you can click subscribe below, leave a comment, and click like, and you'll join my contest. Now let's get started with the Minnesota Vikings and who had the best quarterback seasons of all time. All right, Viking fans, we're going to talk about the top 10 Minnesota Viking quarterback seasons of all time. I took into considerations if a team of a quarterback had a good season, didn't hurt the team, but statistically was pretty good. Maybe not elite, but hey, he took them to the playoffs, and I considered that. I also considered that, hey, we didn't make the playoffs or we had a mediocre record, but we still had amazing quarterback play. I considered all that. If I was just going to consider success, I would have Fran Tarkington on here 5 times. He took us to 3 Super Bowls and an NFC title game. I would have put Joe Cap in here. I would have did all those things, but I want to be. I want to be realistic that, hey, these were great seasons and they should be in our top 10. And I even kept a couple seasons out just because maybe the success of the team, maybe the stats were just, a lot of maybe garbage time. So I kept that out. But I'm going to go with these top 10 seasons. I'm going to start off with 1995 was Warren Moon. Now, let me go to that season. He was 8-8 now, so he didn't have a statistically great year. He threw for 4,228 yards. So record-wise, he didn't have a great year, but he threw for 4,228 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Back in that day, 14 interceptions wasn't that big a deal, but 33 touchdowns was, and that is a great season. Minnesota Vikings were back in the day. We were, Warren Moon, Jim McMahon. We're taking older quarterbacks and just filling the gaps. Jeff George, we had him for like 1999. There's a lot of that. We went through a carousel of quarterbacks, and that's been the Vikings' history. So you can't really look at, except for maybe one quarterback like Fran Tarkington, but we lost him for like 6 years to the Giants. So we just don't have a history of having a 10-year straight quarterback. And it showed, and that was Warren Moon. He filled in nicely. In fact, I don't think he even practiced with the team. There was words that he flew in on the weekend to play for the game, and he wasn't there to practice, much like Nolan Ryan did back in his days playing baseball. So let's move on. I'm going to go with the 2020 season. Kirk Cousins had a statistically superior season, even though the Vikings didn't have a winning record. I'm gonna say I almost kept it out of the top 10 because his first 2 games really struggled, but we didn't start Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. BC Johnson was our second receiver, but once we put Justin Jefferson in there and we started coming back and making a run at the playoffs. There was a lot of MVP talk about Kirk Cousins that season. Just put some weight behind it. Let me go to the 2020 season. He ended up being 7-9. He had 35 touchdowns. That is the most touchdowns he had in his career out of 13 interceptions. So that's been the most interceptions, I believe, as a Viking quarterback. So if you look at it, that is the second most touchdowns in a season in Viking history by a quarterback. I could not keep that out. That's when I did that. I could not keep it out of the top 10. He's had a decent touchdown to interception ratio. His yards are 4,200. That put it at. Let me look. Yeah, that put it third all time for the Vikings. He was third all time in passing that year. He had the second most touchdowns. I just couldn't keep it out. Yeah, I had to go with it. Top 10. It was a top 10 year for sure for the Vikings. So 2021, I also put Kirk Cousins. Last year was a very good year. I think it was his best year overall. I think we would have been a pretty big contender if our defense could hold the ball. I say it and I'll say it loudly. We should have been 12-5 going into the playoffs that year. Instead, we missed it. We lose the Lions game. We don't make the playoffs. But if you go look at the 2021 season, let me look here. They put in receivers who throw the ball too, because they got Justin Jefferson at quarterback. But so Kirk Cousins, 2021 season, he threw for, he was 8-8, threw for 4,221 yards. He had 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So again, 33 touchdowns puts him fourth all time for touchdown passes in a season. Now I consider the time frame when he does. A lot of quarterbacks are throwing 30 some touchdowns, but not in Viking history. There's only been eight people that thrown 30 touchdowns, and Kirk Cousins done it 3 times. So I got to put the 2021 season, I consider it better than the 2020, just because we played much better as an offense, and the only thing that held us back was our defense. And what 2021, I ranked as the eighth best season of a Viking quarterback. Now, the seventh, I ranked Case Keenum. Case Keenum in 2017. If you go back and look at the 2017 season, it's not a top 10 statistical season. Even if he played 16 games, it might have not been a top 10 season either. But he went 11-3, so in 14 games, and one of those, and I guess it would have been 12-3 if you count the Bears game that he came in at halftime. But he gets credit 11-3. He threw for 3,500 yards, 3,547. He threw for 22 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. I felt if he played that whole game and he played the entire season, he'd be pushing 30 touchdowns. Maybe not. He would have been close. Who knows? He might have had a couple more picks, but regardless, that would have been a great season. I put this over the Kirk Cousins seasons because it took us to the playoffs. We had the number 1 defense in the league that year. That helps. But he took us to the playoffs. I'm not even considering playoff stats or anything. It's just seasonal stats. I do consider playoffs the playoffs. He took us there. He came in a pinch, played outstanding. That makes it the 7th best season of Viking history. So 10, 9, 8, 7. And number 6, I am going with Kirk Cousins, 2019. That is my last Kirk Cousins seasons I put on the top 10. He does have a pretty good 2018 season, but I felt with the amount of picks and the garbage time and all that from the 2018 season, how the offense was a mess, no running game, we just forced the ball. So I think statistically that season was padded. I don't find it a very good season. I don't have fond memories of it except for like 2 games where he played his ass off. But I don't have the 2018 season on this list. I'll give it an honorable mention, but 2019, Kirk Cousins played well. We ran the ball a lot, so his statistics were a little muted. So if I go with 2019, Kirk Cousins was 10-5. He would have been even better. He would have been 11-5 because if he played that Bears game, I was at that game. It was really close. We almost had the game in hand, but if Kirk Cousins was there, Sean Mannion didn't throw a TD, and I think he had 2 picks that game. Our defense played its ass off, but Kirk Cousins would have made the difference in that game. I believe he would have went 11-5, and he would have padded his stats a little bit better. But 26 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and he threw for 3,600 yards. I think there was a game in there. I believe he got like 88 yards because we ran the ball the whole time against the Packers. So a lot of that season was muted by Zimmer's run first offense and wait for the defense. And Adam Thielen got hurt that season. And he did come back for the playoffs, but he did take us to the playoffs. He did win that game in comeback fashion against the Saints. Again, I figure he made us to the playoffs. It was a statistically superior season. There was a lot of good things about that season. I ranked it number 6. Now that's the end of Kirk Cousins' top 10 games. 2000. So number 5 is Dante Culpepper in 2000. So if you go to, let me scroll down to 2000. Now, let's see here. Dante Culpepper, he was 11-5. He was early on in his career. He took us to the NFC title game that year. 3,937 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 7 picks. Statistically, probably efficiently, one of he's really had 2 really good seasons. This was one of them. It wasn't as good as one of his other seasons, but I thought this was good enough to be in our top 10. This is when Dante Culpepper, his first year starting, put himself on the map. He was also a running threat. So 33-7 plus the running threat. I put him at number 5 with this season. Now, number 4, Fran Tarkington, 1975. This is the only season I have Fran Tarkington on. I did consider one other year for him, but he only had 19 touchdown passes that year. I know it's a different time frame, but I'm talking about QBs, and I'm like having QB seasons. And there's one season that stands out. It happens to be 1975. This is the year where the Hail Mary was coined. Yes, the Vikings were in the game where the first time Hail Mary was called on a NFL game. The headlines read, Dallas wins Hail Mary by Hail Mary. And that was Roger Staubach in the fourth quarter, threw the ball down the field, and Drew Pearson pushed off. It's the Drew Pearson push off, and it was people arguably call it the best Vikings team in the history of the Vikings. 1975 season, we lost the NFC title game. That was the team most analysts would say was the best Vikings season, best defense, best offense combination that we had going into a playoff. We lose the Dallas Cowboys on a Hail Mary, and that's where the Hail Mary came from. Look it up. Now, and it's funny. Just go look on YouTube. Look up Hail Mary. There's a video about Drew Pearson. He talks about the story. But yeah, that broke a lot of people's hearts. 1975, Fran Tarkington. Let's talk about that season. So we got to scroll down a little bit. 1975. He had just under 3,000 yards. I considered the time period 2,994. He threw for 25 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. And 25 touchdowns back then that's like throwing 40 today almost. 38, 40 today. So 25. And in interceptions, that's pretty low for the day, considering there are certain quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame that got more interceptions than they got touchdowns. Now, Fran Tarkington, that was his most outstanding year. He was 34 years old at the time, which holds well for Kirk Cousins since that's how old he's going to be this year. So Fran Tarkington, 1974 or 1975, that was by far, not by far, but that was his best year as a quarterback of the Vikings. That was arguably one of the best teams the Vikings ever had, if not the best. So Fran Tarkington number 4. Randall Cunningham, 1998. It was tough not putting this number 1. I can't give a guy number 1, I guess, because he didn't start the whole season. And I put a lot of weight on the fact that it was just, it was the best offense of all time, the best scoring offense of all time. But yeah, Randall Cunningham in 1998. Let's go through the stats. Brad Johnson started out that season 2-0 and was doing pretty good. He had 747 yards in 2 games, 7 TDs, 5 interceptions. He was starting off pretty good. That was a little high in interceptions, but we started out 2-0. Season's not lost. Randall Cunningham comes in there. He he signed as our backup. He wasn't expecting to play. He goes 13-1, and we go 15-1 that season, and we lose. If we make a field goal, we probably win the game at the end of the playoff run. He had 3,700 yards in 14 games. He had 34 touchdowns, and he only had 10 picks. And this is where Randy Moss took off as a rookie, and he changed the game. He threw the ball and let Moss go get it, and that was the strategy. And was in the poster read 3 deep. We had 3 great receivers that year, and Randall Cunningham was a big part of that. And he ended up having a rough start in 1999. I think he even benched himself, and Jeff George took over. But that 1998 season was a magical season. I consider that the best team we've ever had. I consider it the best team we ever had. Not the best. You didn't have the best quarterback we ever had, but we had the best team we ever had, I think, all around. But so Randall Cunningham, that brought on a lot of Minnesota Viking fans. Randy Moss, my co-host on Skol Live, he became a fan in '99 with Randy Moss. He was just 1 year late because that 1998 season was a magical season. Now 2009, I'm ranking higher. I'm going with Brett Favre. Brett Favre season. Let's go to 2009, the Wayback Machine. 40 years old. Amazing. 40 years old. 12-4 that season. He won an ESPN against San Francisco for that last minute. It wasn't even a Hail Mary. He was just open, crossing the field, back in the end zone. He dodged a tackle, got loose. Amazing play. 4,202 yards. He had 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. And he probably would have had a lot more because a couple of those games he sat in the second half. So this is pure, unadulterated, amazing offense. Brett Favre probably could have had the best season of all time if he played the whole time. But yeah, that was an amazing season by Brett Favre. Sad it ended. Him throwing a pick. We ended up tying, losing in overtime after Chad Greenway BS pass interference call gets them in field goal range. We lose the game. Next year they make it so both teams get to see the ball, and we didn't get the ball, to go try to score a touchdown to win like they do now. But the next year they changed that rule. I don't even want to think about it. That one hurts so bad. Considering we dominated like 500 yards to 200 yards against the Saints, and it was the turnovers that really messed with us. But we still had it. That was the most heart I've ever seen a Vikings team play with. It was amazing. And Brett Favre, I don't know if he would have been able to play in the Super Bowl. He was hurt so bad after that game. But on to the best season of all time. Probably not the most notable, but it put him on the Madden cover. Dante Culpepper in 2004 had one of the best seasons of any quarterback in NFL history. Let me pull up yards. Is number 1 in yards, number 1 in TDs, and it's 2004. The Vikings only went 8-8 that season, but it put them on the Madden cover. 4,717 yards. I mean, the next closest, let's look at it, was 42.98 by Kirk Cousins. And then, Kirk, and I'll talk about a little bit about this later, But Kirk Cousins on this list quite a bit. TD 39 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Not to mention what he did on the on the ground. The only reason he didn't win the MVP that year is because of a guy named Peyton Manning. Like the last 3 or 4 games this season, just went off. And let me look here. 2004. Peyton Manning threw for 4,500 yards, 4,557, and had 49 touchdowns. Like the last 4 games of the year, he like threw 4 touchdowns each game. It was crazy. Passes up Culpepper, wins MVP. That's the only reason Dante Culpepper did not win MVP is because at the time, Peyton Manning set an NFL touchdown record, who was later beaten by Tom Brady, but that was the year that Peyton Manning did it. But Dante Culpepper had an amazing year that year. 69.2% completion percentage. Amazing. He had a quarterback rating of 110.9. ESPN hadn't come out with their QBR rating yet, but yards per game, 294.8. Yards per completion, 12.4. Amazing. Yards per attempt, 8.6. This I've seen NFL Network did a thing on him once, and he was I think he's gradually being put down the list as more and more seasons go by. But he was one of the greatest seasons of NFL history. He was in their top 10 list a few years ago. But Dante Culpepper, amazing season. I have fond memories on him. He was on this list twice. Cousins was on it 3 times. And the rest of it is just one time. And just to give you some ideas, people are calling me a Kirk Cousins stan, but I'm a realist here. If you go and look, most TDs, Kirk Cousins number 2, number 5, number 8, number 10. Out of the top 10 seasons for touchdowns thrown, Kirk Cousins is 4 of them. The next person with the most seasons, everybody else is tied for 1. Yep. Everybody else is tied for Dante Culpepper has 2. So he has 33 and 39. So Dante Culpepper has 2 of those 10, and Kirk Cousins has 4 of the 10. Now let's go to yardage. Dante Culpepper, number 1. Kirk Cousins, number 2. Number 3, Warner Moon, 4. Warren Moon, 5. Kirk Cousins, 6. So 3 of the top 6 seasons, Kirk Cousins in yardage. Brett Favre, 7. Dante Culpepper, 8. Tommy Kramer, 9. Sam Bradford, 10. Now, Kirk Cousins, that 2019 season, the year he made the playoffs, that was his 13th. He was 13th on the list. So 4 out of the top 13 seasons, Kirk Cousins. I mean, just to put it out there, Dante Culpepper was elite for 2 seasons. The rest of the seasons he was pretty mediocre. He has a losing record. I still rank him higher than Kirk Cousins as an all-time Viking, but it may come soon that Kirk Cousins passes him up. If he has a good year this year, makes the playoffs, I'm probably ranking Kirk Cousins ahead of Culpepper. I was big fond memories of Tommy Kramer, just threw a lot of picks. But again, a product of his time. Randall Cunningham had an elite season, but that was it. Warren Moon, I remember being better than he was, but he did throw a lot of picks, except for the one season, and it was really good. I remember him taking us to the playoffs. I was at the last game of the season one year where he actually sat and Sean Salisbury played for him, and we beat the San Francisco 49ers. We both made the playoffs. That's it. Top 10 quarterback seasons. It was fun to go back and remember these seasons. The ones that hurt the most, probably for older Viking fans, I was only 2 years old when it happened. Was 1975. That one hurt. I'm not even throwing in the Super Bowls because that one hurt. That was, we deserved to lose the 4 Super Bowls that we played in. That game we should have won, and it should have took us to the Super Bowl. The '98 season hurts for people my age, or even maybe younger. that one hurt bad. And then 2009 was the most recent heartache. Just that one was bad. 2017 we got blown out. So in the NFC title games, and then we also got blown out by the in the 2000 season. So that's it for today. The Minnesota Vikings. This is Minnesota Sports Talk. I'm your host, Dave. You can follow me on Twitter at SkoWorld and at MN Sports Podcast. Talk to you soon. Have a great day.